Okay, so welcome to anyone watching this presentation. This is my oral English presentation, which is a mock test. And for this topic, the teacher actually allowed us the liberty to choose whatever topic we wanted. So I decided to do something that I really wanted to do for a long time, but I could not find the time to, which was a kind of a meta-analysis of my previous essays, in which I went and read some of my previous essays. And this is really what I came up with. So let us begin. Obviously, I'm going to start with a little motivation and a summary so that the watcher can expect or know what to expect. For the motivation, there isn't really much to motivate. This is really, I mean, the topic is not actually the critique of education. The topic was originally just a meta-analysis of my essays, and that's really the general theme that I could see all the points discussed in this video fall under. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So my approach for tackling this critique of education, which is quite an ambitious thing to do, I'm going to go over the points of critique, just expand on them a little bit, then move to yeah, I forgot to actually modify this, because originally there was an ideal solution which was rather not only related to education or the educational system, because in my view, the problem and also how we should devise our solution is to actually see the thing how they are, and things are interconnected, and because things influence each other, and the educational system is largely influenced by politics and economy and vice versa. So my ideal solution was more of a how to devise a society to invest in the people better, which is a naive solution, if I do say so myself, because it does actually take conflict out of the equation, which is not possible. But for this segment, I'm going to just go over how we can I'm just going to lay out my solutions for the points of critique, to save up on time, because the previous one took a lot of time. And then for the patching under the current system, I'm just going to kind of talk about how I would approach this under the current system, because I do want to be a professor or an educator when I grow up, and I have taught a little bit about this, and I'm just going to talk about how I'm going to approach this my approach for education was going to be like, so that I could do a good job of teaching the students. So let us begin. So for the points of critique, I'm just going to go over each one and talk a little bit about them. First of all, we have a lack of specialization, which should not be confused with a lack of or with a too much diversity, because in the end diversity is good. But the problem is that we are or the system is teaching students too many things in too little time. Prime example, if you ask any student, they have three to four subjects in a single day, each class probably lasting 2 hours to 4 hours, and that's not really ideal, because that's not how the brain works. The brain creates connections, and the connections are being reinforced, so it's a kind of an elimination process, where the one that you spend the most time with is going to stay. And this kind of approach is not really ideal, and it is really something known. I mean, in the advertisement business, it is known that for example, your target or your customer needs to at least see the ad 7 to 8 times at least, so that he can at least consider buying the product, not even go and buy the product. And that same principle should be used with students. So should not really have too much to learn in too little time, and there should be a very big emphasis on specialization, which really just means to take each one and master it, then move on to the other one, rather than try and do everything at once. For the lack of emphasis on the big picture, which is just a kind of it's not really a problem. I don't think this was thought of in the design of the system, but it is just a byproduct, which is that the students are just too stuck on the details, too caught up in the very leaves of the tree, and there is really no understanding of the roots. and most importantly, they do not really know what is their mission. For example, me as a computer scientist, or rather, let's talk a little bit about mathematics. So so scientists are people that are trying to understand the world. They're trying to derive facts from the world, and that really involves the scientific method, which I'm not going to go into. But to prove something, or at the very least to have a formal proof, you need some sort of a proving language, something that is final, precise, and rigorous, and universal. And mathematics is kind of that language. And mathematicians, in a sense, are tools, or tool creators, and these tools are being used by scientists. And the other part of the spectrum is that to do science you need a brain, and the computer is a very, very proficient brain at doing mathematics. So in a sense, a computer scientist's job is to be a master of communication, or rather be able to be extremely good at explaining to a machine how to do something, whether it's computation, even in business, whether it's how to paint the screen with some components, with some logic behind them to provide some sort of service. And people are not really understanding that. People are more caught up which language is good, which one pays well, which one is this, which one is the better, and that's not really like necessarily bad. But understanding where you fit in the grand scheme of things is a very big advantage. And so that's not really emphasized in the the current educational system. Sorry. As for the testing methods, I do believe they are flawed for many reasons. Obviously, I mean the whole because originally these were not separate points of critique. I was critiquing the system as a whole. And that's really the proper approach, because things are really connected, and you have to see things to see things with their connections, rather than just try and break them down into bytes, because the connection are what matters. But that's not really doable from a time standpoint. But for the testing methods, the one I'm going to focus on is the human aspect, which is the fact that a person is being tested on something that is concrete by another person, and that's not really proper, because at the end of the day, those testing methods, I mean the argument that's going for the testing method is that they are a formalized method of testing the students, whereas that same argument can be used against them, because those formalized methods are not really formalized, because it's another person who's doing them, and we have no guarantee that of the standards of this person, of this teacher. So that's to be discussed further. As for the incompetence of the educational personnel, which is something very controversial, and I hope it does not really stray your mind from having a logical approach, other than think I have some sort of grudge against. I don't have really a grudge against anyone, and it's not really a incompetence per se. It's just that the way the system is designed, and it forces a sort of mindset that makes the educators seem kind of incompetent. Prime example is that, for example, you may be trying to teach a certain concept to the students, and there are certain group that does not understand this aspect of the concept, and there is another group that does not understand this concept, and you can't really have them to get a feel, because each person is inherently different. And it is very difficult to paint a picture that everybody can see from the same perspective, especially in hard sciences, because there is this idea that there are visual learners, but that's not really what comes into play. But each person's ability to understand is heavily influenced by his life, and by his, I mean, by whatever the factors are. But the end result is that you can't really have a standard method for teaching everyone. And the way that the teachers, or it seems to me, have coped with this, is that they try to just adopt a copy and paste approach, where they just teach the student how to do it. They don't teach them how to understand stuff. For example, in physics, you are taught how to to solve equations, which equations go in which way, and that is also sadly influencing the second point, which is the emphasis on big picture. I mean, for example, mathematicians are stuck trying to prove something that is not really provable, I mean, it's not really logical to try and prove one. I mean, I'm not talking about proper mathematicians, but just students. They're stuck trying to prove 1 is equal to 2 and all these other things, and those things are not logical, because you cannot have a unit, which is because you devise that unit, and that unit cannot be equal to 2 units. So in a sense, it is just a combination of or the influence of the system, and or the influence of the factor on which on the basis on which the system is designed. So yeah, the last point is the integration of the system into personal life, which is a very large point, and that was one of the main sections that took up a lot of time. So I'm just going to give a basic sentence to try and provide the idea. And the idea is really that the system is not really well integrated into personal life, and that's causing problems, because at the end we all know that humans are inherently curious beings, and it is quite absurd that a curious person does or hates an institution that promises him knowledge. So I think the system is eating up too much time. It's not really well integrated into the personal life of the students. So for the ideal solution or solutions, or my takes on how we could solve each one of these critique points. First of all, for specialization, I can never say that word. For specialization, it's really a simple matter. It's to have a specialized program, but that comes with its own challenges, and obviously the system, the current system has a very good point going for it, which is diversity. Because at the end of the day, a person is not just going to work or just going to live off of those skills. Is going to need a lot more skills. It's also a very good way of teaching, or I don't want to say indoctrinating, but of teaching or having or producing citizens, very educated citizens. I mean, we could teach the kids how to deal with real life, but at the end of the day, that's not really there's a point of diminishing returns, and the way the system is designed, it does not really, it goes against the general idea of learning. It's just a tool. It's just a stepping stone to get a degree, to get to work and to live, and that's mainly due to the design and the culture around it. But to solve that, and to also to add to that point, in the current society we have, I mean, if you can see this as a layering process, we have used the previous inventions to create newer inventions. We have built upon them, and this chain has been going on for so long. Each generation, or each period, if you want to say, there are certain inventions, certain breakthroughs, and based on those breakthroughs we generate newer breakthroughs. And the point, we have reached a certain point where you can't really compete unless you are super focalized at one thing. You have to devote your whole life to a certain subject to compete, and that's really talking about healthy normal person. I mean, each person is different, and it's going to differ for how much time he needs to, or how much specialization time he needs with a certain subject to become very proficient at it, or to be able to compete in the general market. So we're just going to have a general or a highly focused training period, which is going to be, this is very important, a non-time restricted period. So we're not going to tell, hey, you have 20 years, or by 18 you should graduate, or within 5 years you're going to learn this. And this is really a discouraging point. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I mean, but to me it seems like I mean, this goes back to the previous point, that society, or this is very well interconnected with society, and they influence each other. And I think the way we have designed our world with different nations and different I mean, we're separating ourselves from each other, and that's really causing a concern, because let's be real. If you see someone is flourishing, you don't want them to flourish, and this creates a race for arms, a race for personnel, a race for economy. And I guess governments are prompted to just try and pump out as much work in hand as possible to try and get the economy going, and therefore they have this time restricted periods to try and be efficient. But you can't really be efficient. This is something that's very important. I mean, life is not really to me at least, it's not really just going out having fun and doing this. You have to have something that's driving you, something that's giving you a sense of purpose. And the best sense of purpose is something that you're going to do to spend your whole life to. And this is apparent. I mean, all these celebrities, not just the actors, but actual celebrities that have reached their fame, that have gained fame by something they're doing, whether it's athletes, high-level athletes or scientists. It's simple. They began at a very young age, and they spent their whole life honing their skills and at a single subject. And that's really the way to do it. So we should have a highly focused training period, but this comes with also its set of challenges, and the ones I'm going to talk about are just the more important one, the most important ones. And first of all is that when you choose a subject, you can't really go back, because this is going to result in a chain reaction. You're just going to end up in the old system in a much less efficient way per se. Because imagine you want to become a doctor, for example, and you start becoming a doctor, and you kind of don't like it, and you start moving to something. You kind of don't like it, start moving to something. So that's not really ideal, and you're going to end up in this loop, and you're going to defy the whole idea of having a focused training period. So we're going to have before that a sampling period in which the students or the subjects of the education system are going to it could be a shadowing period where they spend a week with a certain profession, and they shadow that person. And I believe it is not really important for I mean, there's this idea circulating the internet that it's not what you hear about, it's not all good. I mean, that's really not important. What's important is giving them not the approval, but the peace of mind that what they're doing is the right thing. So I believe in the sampling period, professionals who are going to be shadowed by kids should be encouraged to actually try and sell this profession, try to just only break out the good things about it, so that when the kids go into this highly focused training period, they go with this incredible motivation, with incredible belief that this is the best thing they could do. And when they graduate, and I mean, this is a very big point in the current system, which is the integrity. It lacks integrity, and you're taught to expect something, but when you really get into it, it's not really what you expected, and that's really a point of demotivation. It's devastating to the students, but that's for a completely different reason. It is for this purpose, which because life is really not sunshines and rainbows. To a degree, it's a hard thing to do. You have to be competent, you have to be resilient, mentally resilient. So once you find yourself that it is not really what you expect, it's not sunshine and rainbows, at the very least you have something to rely on. You have something that you spend a lot of time honing. That's very good. But also the sampling period comes with its own challenges, which is I mean, if you're asking a kid to do sampling period, everybody just gonna do what seems like fun, what seems, but depending on human nature. I mean, boys are drawn to fighting, so you never know. So there's going to be a period, and this is very important period for other reasons. So it solved a lot of other problems, and this period is going to be developing proper thinking patterns. So we're going to teach the kids how to think for themselves and how to think properly. And I believe the best way to do this, to achieve proper thinking patterns, and to also have the kids learn other skills such as empathy, history, and all these other information that they're not going to get with this super focalized system, is by reading and writing. So the kids, this is also not good. I mean, all of these are not going to be time restricted. So the kid, once he integrates in school, he does not really have a time limit. He's just going to work until his teacher or his supervisor deems him with a proper thinking pattern. So the kids can graduate from this period after 1 year. He can graduate after 10 years. It doesn't matter. But within this period, it's going to have to be reading literature, stories, history, philosophy. There's this idea that philosophy is hard for kids. I discussed this with my friends earlier, but I mean, not earlier, earlier in the week. But I'm not going to talk about that. But in the end, this is very important, and the important part is writing. I mean, this is really what they're going to be tested on. This is really important because from personal experience, I used to believe I know something, I understand something until I try and write about it. And this still happens to this day. You realize that you just have some sort of unconnected ideas floating around in your head, and you can't really make a coherent sentence, or you can't really formulate it or iterate it in a way so that the others get really the progression about it. And writing is going to be very important, and this is also very important in society because communication, I mean, the author spoke a lot about this. His name is Ludwig Wittgenstein, whom is a philosopher, and he wrote a couple of books. One of his books is logical philosophical treatise. The title is in Latin, and the other book is Philosophical Investigation, and he just talks about logic and how language is flawed. And it's not really that language is flawed, but like we took it for granted. Language is a very difficult thing, and being able to be articulate and actually use language in a proficient way is very difficult, and that's not how the general idea for the public, because language is something we use. We really took it for granted. So in this period, the kids are going to be reading, so which is important for the general knowledge. History, something that they could use, because at the end of the day, being highly focalized is just more of a practice period. But to practice, you need material. It does not necessarily need to be material in relation with the subject you're practicing. For example, if you're a computer scientist, you're going to need history, you're going to need all this literature, you're going to need everything, because at the end of the day, information is information, and those things affect you, and those things rub on you. Everything is connected in a sense. So once again, in this period, they're going to be reading and writing, and they're going to be tested for the ability to properly articulate their ideas, and the ability to actually have their own ideas and their own point of view about something. And they're going to develop confidence, which is something that is very lacking in today, in my humble opinion. Obviously, the second period, it can take from 2 years to 3 years, whatever, it depends. It's a sampling period in which the kids are going to be introduced to various professions. I don't really like the term profession. I mean various subjects, and they can choose which subject to continue into. And then we're going to have this highly focused period. I'm going to talk about what's really going to happen in this period in the next block. But for this highly focused period, the kid is going to be just highly focused on his subject. Obviously, testing I'm going to discuss that in a bit. As for the last point, it's going to be a supervised integration. This is just giving a hint into the ideal solution I proposed originally, which is because the idea is really more of a society, a design of a society. It's not really just in relation to education. But the supervised integration could be, for example, right after graduation, they're going to be supervising the kids in the first phase, and then they can move on to the integration to the business market. This is going to be mandatory, and this is going to actually be under a time period. So for example, they're going to teach the kids supervise the kids for 5 years, and then move on to the market, to the business market, to the industry market for 3 to 4 years, and they can move on to higher education, in which they will supervise kids in the third, or students in the third phase, which is the highly focused training period. For maybe 3 years, they can do afterwards 5 years of research on their own, and then they're free to do whatever they want. And this is going to sort of create a self-sufficient cycle. Obviously, I'm missing a lot of points from my ideal solution about sports and how really to have a whole system. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But that's the general idea, which is this enforcing specialization is not really accurate. Should be how to design the proper system according to my ideas, of course, to my opinion. But that's for that. As for the painting the big picture first, obviously it's just as simple as telling the kids what is the job of their subject. For example, the same we can tell the kids that you're a true creator for scientists if you're the computer student, or you're tasked with deriving facts from the cells if he's a biologist or whatever. And also this is much this big picture idea is really just giving them a sense of purpose, and that's really important because you cannot really separate education from life. You can't just tell the kid, hey, this is separate and your life is separate. No, you need to tie them together because they are tied together. So I choose to really not talk about this a lot, but we're going to enforce logotherapy. Logotherapy is a concept first I think founded by Viktor E. Frankl, which is the author. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which is a book. He wrote about his experience in the Holocaust, in the Nazi concentration camps, and within these Nazi concentration camps, he spoke about how I mean, obviously it is very gruesome and sad, but he spoke that the ones who survived are the ones who had a sense of purpose. It was not the tougher ones, it was not the beautiful women, the big men, the cunning and the smart, but it was those who had the sense of purpose that gave them a mental strength to actually stay alive and try with whatever means they have. So this is very important. Obviously, the second, which I touched on earlier, just enforcing the understanding of the roots is not really important. In general, the leaves of the tree, if you want to say, because those details can always be, especially in this, can always be researched, especially in the age of information, which is readily available on the internet. So just having a the clear map in your head is much more efficient than having the whole spectrum of information, which is just readily available, and you're going to harness all that brain power into something that is actually into what counts, rather than just things that you can readily research. And obviously, by researching, you're going to have them in your mind just in case. As for the not forcing dependencies directly, this touches on the point of how the highly focused training period should be, and this is because if you cannot pick out the big idea, is that the problem with the current system in a general sense is that we're if to give an example, we're like an overprotective parent. We're trying to do everything on our own, not really letting our kids, in the sense, do their own thing. We're just trying to affect everything, and that's really not the way to do it. So for this not forcing dependencies, it's basically like programming. Just going to set certain variables in the beginning, not try to forcibly tell them what to do, but try to guide them to move in that direction. So for example, if the kids chose computer science as a subject, the thing we're going to tell them, hey, you should start with programming. You just get a computer, just learn a very easy language to learn, just get building, get doing the fun things, and eventually he's going to start doing fun things on his own, supervised obviously by someone that's very proficient in the subject. And eventually he's going to come to the realization, once he reaches a plateau, of course, that what he's doing is basically just defining a set of input and a set of output, and proofing a sort of a function to transform the input set into the output set, and that's the definition of discrete mathematics. So he's going to learn that he needs discrete mathematics in order to improve, and he's going to allocate 3 or 4 months of his training period for discrete mathematics, and so on to each dependency that comes. But the problem, the important idea is that they should not really be forced, and they should be deliberate, and because, for example, 2 kids can start with the same subject, but one of them can pick out intuitively one of the dependencies, while the other cannot. So one person needs something, and the other person does not need something, or needs another thing. So it is better to let the kids decide or choose for themselves, and it is also much more important for all this to work, to have them have a sense of purpose, so that they really want to do this. If they really don't want to do this, they're not going to do it properly, and we're just going to have a very defective system, and this is a problem with this is the big problem with the system that I'm explaining. It's a miss or hit. It's either gonna work or gonna miserably fail. So for the other points, it's the testing methods. I obviously said that I do not agree with many of the subjects. Obviously, the tests are there is no concept of second chance. Obviously, there is a second chance, literally, but does not mean I really want a second chance. But that means there is not really room for failure. So you're testing a kid. He has an exam on a set day, and there isn't really a measure for the unexpected. I mean, the word unexpected should not really exist, because in life the unexpected happens, so we should expect the unexpected in a sense. For example, the kid can be a very good kid at mathematics, but on the day of the exam he got sick, or something happened, or the nerves hit him, because the mental aspect is very important, so he kind of got shook and he couldn't really perform well. So that's not really a viable method. And the good method in a general idea is to have a method that is that does not involve, or at the very least limits, the influence of outside factors on the testing of the kid. And the best method for me is to have a kid innovate something new. It could be, for example, writing a book. In computer science, it's easy, just providing a very good program with all of the measuring factors for a good scientist. For example, of I don't really have an example in mind right now, but I think the idea is clear. And obviously we should not have minimal human interventions. For example, just set the requirements, agree with the kid on the requirements of his testing method, and then have him provide what he needs to provide for in whichever time period he likes. And that's really it in a sense. As for the last subject, and that's really a big point, and it took a lot of time in previous takes of this presentation, so I'm not gonna talk so I'm not gonna talk as much about it. I'm just gonna touch on it a little bit. But I think as I mentioned earlier, we're just like a very overprotective parent, so why not make this kind of a tactical investment. So we're just going to have kids study 3 hours, supervised 3 hours in the morning, with the hope that the kids actually with the hope that this hate for the education is going to be removed. And if the hate of education is going to be removed, the kids are going to do it on their own in their homes, and we can get a lot more time, a lot more focused, because at the end of the day, if you're in a class under the pretext you're studying a certain subject, does not mean you're learning. You could space out, you could do a lot of things, because we cannot control the minds of people. And what really counts is not just attendance time, but more so focus time. So if we can generate more focus time by making this tactical investment, which the goal of this investment is just to remove the hate for the absurd hate for knowledge, and have the kids develop a little bit of love for this. Obviously we're going to need to force a little bit of discipline, or just the ability to do something despite not wanting to do it. And I believe this can be done with just removing first, or at the very least the entry point should be removing this hate for education, and that's definitely removing what the kids hate about education. And in my experience, that's just taking too much time. And obviously there should be an emphasis on sports, and sports because the mental aspect is very important in everything in life. And sports are a very good way to develop that. I mean, if you wrestle, or if you some sports where you put your physicality against another kid, it's humbling, and it's also very tough on your mind, and it makes you grow. Especially wrestling, which is also very less impact sport than boxing, but it's very good. And also the emphasis on sports should also give them a sense of that they are being cared for. For example, as a computer scientist, I'm taught mathematics, I'm taught object-oriented programming, I'm taught English, I'm taught how even to communicate, but I'm not really taught how to take care of my health. I'm spending the whole day hunched up in front of a computer, and no matter how much I train for these 2-hour sessions, what I do for the whole day is going to dictate how I'm going to be. You know, if I'm just damaging my posture for the whole day. That's very, very dangerous, and very dangerous because it's a posture, because the nerves actually the nerves, if you can imagine the discs of your spine, the nerves span out of these discs, and we have a problem. The discs actually pinch on the nerves, and they can cause weakness in your legs, can cause weakness in your arms, can cause problems with bowel movement, and that's just a bad thing to experience. And we should really be taught how to take care of our health, how to have proper health, so that we can feel. So this trying to contribute as so the big idea is trying to contribute as much to having the kids love education rather than hate it, and rather than seeing it as part of their life, rather than just a chore done, and so that they can get over with it as soon as possible. So let us move. So for the patching under the current system, which is how I'm going to approach this if this system still stands when I become an educator. First of all, I'm going to have proper lectures. There is a good teacher that I had today. His name is Salam Farhat, and what really was because I had an intuitive idea about how it should be, but until I saw him do it, I realized this is how it should be. I mean, he kind of like gave me an example when I had just a vague idea in my head, and his explanations particularly were very good. He just spoke in a swift, small sentence, or rather a small paragraph, nothing more than 15 seconds of speaking. He did not really, for example, if you want to give an idea, you're going to use two adjectives, for example. This is extraordinarily and very, very good. He just used the very good. He just used singular words, very precise singular words in a very compact sentence, and said what should be said, and said nothing else that should not be said. And he just paused for a couple of seconds, 5 seconds. He just look at you and he repeats. And this actually is very good, because you are given subconsciously to the student the idea that was said is just there. This is what exists. I'm sorry for stuttering. I'm also stuttering. Sorry if my voice is a little bit cranky, because I'm fasting and I can't really drink water, so my mouth is very dry. But circling back to the point, when he said things, you didn't have the subconscious idea that there are too many parts to this explanation. There is just the single part that he said, and that's really what should happen in lectures. That is the entry point that gives you the idea, the general idea, and try and form a map of what you should study on your own in your home. He guides you a very good guide. He gives you a very good guiding manual on how to study things alone, or how you can properly research things in the most efficient way. Obviously, how I'm going to layer this, or how to expand on this, is to adopt this protocol for my explanations. But also, for example, when trying to explain a certain subject, I'm going to speak first of all about the layers of the subject, the history of how each layer became, or how it came to be, and obviously the implementation of each layer, and explain a little bit each layer, what it is, how it is created. And the goal is not really for the kid to understand history or to understand the layers or whatever, but the goal is just to give them this map in their head of the progression of the layers. And that's really what counts, because obviously if they want history, they can Google it. If they want anything, they can Google it. But just giving them the proper roots on which to build on, if they want to build on, that's the proper idea. And repetition is key. Repetition is everything. There is a very good analogy of how the brain works. It said the brain is like a slope of ice, and you have a sled. And each time you go down the slope, you kind of create an indent on this ice. And eventually, with time, you're going to have various tracks. And eventually, the brain is going to be only able to move in those tracks, and that's kind of how we do it. Once you pick up a certain pattern, and you do it for multiple times, you're just going to be proficient at this type of patterns. So this is how my lectures are going to be, give or take. Obviously, for the I mean, these patching methods, these keys that I'm stating here, are just my way of trying to exploit what the students trying to exploit what the students how the students react to certain things in order to get them to do what I want them to do. Obviously, the first point does not really get into it, but the second point is just a way of forcing the students to to focus and to attend each lesson, because the students, they come and they say, oh my god, they don't say oh my god, they say, oh, the exam is still far away, I can probably recuperate in the next session or at home, and they just kind of become passive in the session. That's not good. I'm going to have a testing test or an exam each session, a small exam, about what we just said in the session, and that exam is going to be integrated into the final grade. And that's kind of a way to force students to actually attend and to force students to focus in the lesson. Obviously, the lesson is not going to be something spectacular, just as I said, very simple. My philosophy is just, rather than doing a lot of things, just do one thing and do it properly, or do what counts rather than try and do everything. So as for the exam is going to be a practical open exam for us. So to kind of paint an example session based on the previous 3 points, at the beginning of the year, at the first session, I'm going to declare the exam. For example, if I'm a computer science student, I'm going, hey, the exam is this project, here are the requirements, you should turn in a project that is working, and the working projects can do the following requirements. And obviously, it's session they're going to be a comprehension exam, but if you could finish the project before the end of the term, you don't have to come. You basically passed. So this serves two things. First of all, it gives them a sense of purpose. So each session now, he's looking for things he need. He knows where the things he's learning fit in. And obviously, this is a much better form of testing than having them perform an exam on a certain date, that various things could happen before that date or in that date. You never know. But this is just a very good second chance. It's not really second chance, it's multiple chances, but it's a very open chance, and they don't really have, there is minimal room for life to get in the way of this education. As for this is just the incomprehensible grading formula, just a way to get the students from this mindset of trying to just pass. So the grading formula, I don't know if it's because currently a lot of teachers are saying it, and are stating it in the beginning of the term, and I think it's probably mandatory by law. For me, I'm just going to, for example, there's this mathematical tricks where you get the 1 + 2, you can represent it with a very complex formula. I'm just going to do that so that the kids get discouraged at the very least, if not, or make it very hard to calculate their grades, so that they actually don't really have to worry about that, and they have to worry about performing each and every session. So the last or the last point in this course, or in the lectures segment, is that going to be that the completed the requirements only result in a passing grade. And the best way to explain this is, I'm going to go back to the example. So on first session, I'm going to declare that each session they're going to have a test, and the test is just going to be an essay. They're going to just try and write what they think about or how try to explain to me what they learned this session. And these essays are going to be run in a model, in an artificial intelligence model, and the model will have a set of key points he's going to try and look out for. He's just going to tell me which key points were not really clear, and I'm going to restate them. For example, the session is going to begin, the session is 2 hours. Right around 1 hour 20, they're going to begin the exam. I'm going to run their essays on the model, and for the last 20 minutes, I'm just going to revisit the point that were not clear according to the model. And obviously, the essays are not going to be graded per se, but they're going to be just pass, not pass. And we're going to declare the practical project or exam. I'm going to tell them, hey, If you turn in a project that is working, meaning it fits all the requirements, that's just going to result in a passing grade. And if you want more than a passing grade, you're going to have to do a little bit more, and that's it. Just keep it very ambiguous. And the goal here is to get the students thinking for themselves. I mean, if you do this, obviously, if a student turn in some super amazing front end and another student just turn in some very minor tweaks, I'm not going to be discriminating. I don't care. I just want the students to do something extra, and I don't want to force them to do something extra. Like, for example, if you want an alternate example, an alternate wrong example in my brain would be, in my mind would be that tell them, hey, if you turn in a working project, it's just going to result in a passing grade, but if you want to earn more than a passing grade, you should have a very good front end. That's very limiting. The goal here is to have the students to actually have this moment of creative genius, trying to add their little touch on it. And I'm not going to really, I'm okay with giving them 19 for just minor tweaks, and I'm okay with, for example, why I would not really want to do that is, for example, the people that pass this term are going to tell going to tell the newer students what I'm like, and that's okay. The important thing is just to have them think for themselves, and that's really how the lectures or the sessions in which I'm going to explain the subject are going to be like. As for the practical sessions here in the system, I mean, I want to two systems, the Moroccan system and the French system, and they're pretty much the same. We both have a supervised exercises session where we do exercises on a paper, not theoretical, but kind of practical. And there is a purely practical exam where we work with the actual materials. For example, in a computer science setting, the supervised session, you're going to solve software problems on paper, and the practical session, you're going to solve them on a machine. For a doctor, they're going to just in the supervised session speak about certain stuff, and the practical session is kind of a lab work. It's a laboratory work. For me, I'm going to remove the laboratory work. The laboratory work should be something that is openly free. So, for example, students can sign up on their own. But for the practical session, I'm going to have just practical sessions, and these sessions are going to standing, and the idea is just to kind of get the students from their shield, because a lot of students, they become passive. They can hide by the fact that they're sitting. If you're standing up, I'm going to form them into groups. I'm going to give them marks, and just basically forcing activity rather than passivity in these practical sessions. And that's going to be how I'm give or take going to patch this. Obviously, the latest point, which is there's a big flaw with my system, it is heavily dependent on previous session. For example, this happened to me this year. If you come in late and you have to wait because, for example, making or submitting your inscription you require an appointment, and that took me 2 months or 1 month and a half maybe, and I could not really attend class until I made this inscription. And I found myself very late. If by any chance or by sickness or whatever factor a student has to miss or missed a class, I'm going to have a sort of a system to not really punish them that much, and most importantly, I have a very coherent tree structure, so that if they miss, they can very easily just spring back into action by just doing work on their own, and they're not really stuck. So just eliminating this sort of dependency on me to learn the subject, but while keeping the dependency on me to, or the necessity to attend classes and actually be active. And yeah, that's basically it. Obviously, this is I don't know how much time I did this time. I hope I don't have to do another take. Because the teacher was kind enough to allow me to pass the time restriction, but I should not really make it too long, and this is not really possible, because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, the subject was not really critique of education, just a meta-analysis of my previous essays, and it was a far more larger subject than critique of education. and that was not really doable in 30 minutes or give or take. So I had to just section it and speak about what's more maybe important in relation to what could be presentable as a presentation. And please, if the teacher is watching this, do not take this as an insult. It's not that I give you a byproduct, but in fact this is a very personal thing to do. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not going to take offense to that. So yeah, that was the end. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks to the teacher once again to allow us the liberty, or to give us a very open-ended assignment. I'm very grateful also for having been one of his students this year. Very amazing and charismatic teacher. And that's all. Thank you.